Story 1. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and secrets don't stay buried for long, or so I thought. Our town had its quirks, sure, but nothing ever seemed out of the ordinary. That was until last year, when everything changed. It started with a rumor. At first it was just whispers, something about the police investigating a local business owner. No one took it seriously. In a town like ours, gossip spreads faster than wildfire, and most of it turns out to be nothing. But this time, it wasn't nothing. I remember the day it all came to light. I was at the diner, the only one in town, grabbing coffee with my friend Jake. The place was packed, as usual, with farmers, shopkeepers, and retirees all chatting about the weather or the latest high school football game. Then the sheriff walked in. Sheriff Daniels was a no-nonsense kind of guy, the kind who didn't show up unless something serious was going on. He went straight to the counter, whispered something to the waitress, and left. The whole diner went quiet. You could feel the tension in the air, like everyone was holding their breath. "What do you think that's about?" Jake asked, leaning in. "No idea," I said, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. Later that night, the news broke. A pedophile ring had been uncovered, involving some of the most respected men in town. Store owners, businessmen, even a retired teacher. It had been going on for decades, hidden in plain sight. Some of the members had been dead for years, but their secrets were still alive, buried in old records and whispered confessions. The whole town was in shock. These were men we'd grown up around, men we trusted. They ran the grocery store, the hardware shop, the gas station. They were at every town meeting, every church service. And all this time they were hiding something so dark, so horrific, that it made you question everything you thought you knew about the people around you. I couldn't stop thinking about it. How could something like this go unnoticed for so long? How could no one have seen the signs? But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. In a town like ours, people don't ask questions. They don't want to know the truth because the truth is messy, and it ruins the illusion of a perfect little community. The investigation went on for months. More names came out, more arrests were made. People started locking their doors at night, something we'd never done before. The streets felt different, quieter, like the town itself was holding its breath. One night I was sitting on my porch, trying to make sense of it all, when I saw something that still haunts me. Across the street, in the old hardware store, a light was on. The place had been closed for weeks, ever since the owner was arrested. I figured it was just the cops going through evidence or whatever. But then I saw a shadow move past the window. I froze. It wasn't a cop. It was too small, too quick. It looked like a child. I grabbed my phone and called the sheriff. "There's someone in the hardware store," I said, my voice shaking. "Stay put," he said. "I'm on my way." I watched the store, my heart pounding. The shadow moved again, darting from one side of the room to the other. Then it stopped, right in front of the window. For a moment, I thought I was imagining things, but then it turned and looked at me. It wasn't a child. It wasn't anything I'd ever seen before. Its face was pale, almost translucent, and its eyes were black, empty voids that seemed to suck the light out of the room. It stared at me for what felt like an eternity, and then it was gone. The sheriff arrived a few minutes later, but by then, the light was off and the store was empty. He searched the place, found nothing, and told me it was probably just my imagination. But I know what I saw. After that night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that face, those eyes. I started hearing things, whispers in the dark, footsteps in the hall. I thought I was losing my mind, but then I started hearing the stories. Other people had seen it too, a shadow in the window, a face in the dark. Some said it was the ghost of a child, one of the victims. Others said it was something worse, something that had been drawn to the town by all the evil that had been hidden here for so long. I don't know what it was, and I don't want to know. All I know is that our town will never be the same. The secrets are out, and the shadows are watching. Story 2. I didn't believe the stories at first. You hear so much weird crap growing up in a small town, and most of it's just nonsense people make up for attention. But this one stuck with me because, well, everyone swore it was real. We've got this stretch of road outside of town called Carson's Bend. During the day, it's nothing special. Just 2 miles of cracked asphalt cutting through cornfields and overgrown brush. At night, though, it's different. People claim that if you speed on Carson's Bend after midnight, you'll see him, the ghost rider. Everyone I knew had a story. My buddy Sam said his cousin saw it once, a shadowy figure on a motorcycle chasing him all the way back to town. Another guy I worked with said he and his girlfriend saw headlights in their rearview mirror, but when they stopped, there was no one there. It all sounded like a bunch of bull to me. That was until it happened to me. It was a Friday night, and I was driving home from work. I had stayed late to cover for someone, so by the time I hit Carson's Bend, it was already 12:15 a.m. I didn't even think about the ghost stories until I checked the clock. For a second, I hesitated, my foot hovering over the gas pedal. But then I laughed it off. Ghosts don't chase people. It's just a road. I sped up. The first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. Out there, away from the town, it's always quiet, but this was different. There wasn't even the sound of wind or crickets, just silence. My headlights cut through the dark, bouncing off the trees and the reflective road signs. Then, in the rearview mirror, I saw it. At first, it was just a flicker, like the faint glow of headlights far behind me. I figured it was another car, so I didn't think much of it. But then the lights got closer, way too fast. They weren't just catching up to me. They were barreling toward me like whoever was driving had the pedal pressed to the floor. I gripped the wheel tighter and sped up, figuring some idiot was out joyriding. I glanced in the mirror again, and that's when I realized something was wrong. The lights weren't normal. They were a harsh, blinding white, almost too bright to look at. And there was no sound, no engine, no tires on the road, just silence. The lights got closer. "Come on, man," I muttered to myself, glancing in the mirror again. "What are you doing?" That's when I saw it. It wasn't a car, it was a motorcycle. A black motorcycle, sleek and polished, with no rider that I could see. The handlebars were empty, the seat unoccupied, but it moved like someone was controlling it, weaving slightly, staying perfectly centered behind me. My chest tightened as panic set in. I slammed my foot on the gas, the engine roaring as I pushed the old car to its limits. But no matter how fast I went, the motorcycle stayed right behind me, its headlights burning through the dark, unwavering. "Get away from me!" I shouted, my voice shaking. I swerved, trying to lose it, but the thing followed every move I made, like it was glued to my bumper. Then it started getting closer, too close. I could see the chrome gleaming in my taillights, the faint outline of the engine block, and still, there was no rider. The headlights began to flicker, not like they were shorting out, but like they were blinking, pulsing in an unnatural rhythm. That's when I heard it, the sound I'll never forget. It wasn't an engine or the wind. It was a laugh. Low and guttural at first, it rose into a sharp, maniacal cackle that filled the air, even though my windows were rolled up. It wasn't coming from behind me. It was everywhere. "No, no, no, no!" I kept repeating, my knuckles white as I clutched the steering wheel. The motorcycle pulled up alongside me. I could barely keep my eyes on the road as I glanced to my left. There it was, keeping pace with me, its wheels not even touching the ground. The damn thing was floating, its tires spinning in slow motion as if mocking the speed I was going. And then I saw it. There was someone on it now, or something. A figure dressed in black with a helmet that reflected nothing. Just an empty void where a face should have been. It turned its head toward me, and though I couldn't see its eyes, I could feel them, cold and piercing, boring into me. "Leave me alone!" I screamed, tears streaming down my face. The figure raised a hand, thin, skeletal fingers wrapped in black leather, and pointed ahead. I followed the gesture, my heart sinking. The road was gone. There was nothing ahead of me but blackness, a void that swallowed the light from my headlights. I hit the brakes, the tires screeching as the car skidded to a stop. But the motorcycle didn't stop. It shot forward, vanishing into the darkness like it had never been there. I sat there shaking, staring at the emptiness in front of me. Slowly the void receded, the road reappearing as though nothing had happened. I turned the car around and drove back the way I came, my hands trembling on the wheel the entire time. I haven't driven on Carson's Bend since, and I never will. Story 3. I didn't want to move to Swope Hall, but I didn't have much of a choice. My roommate situation was a disaster. Third one in a row who couldn't stand me, and honestly, I didn't blame them. I'm not exactly easy to live with. That's how I ended up in the oldest dorm on campus, the one everyone avoids if they can help it. Swope Hall was creepy even during the day. The single rooms were small, the hallways dimly lit, and most of the dorm was empty. It felt like walking through an abandoned building. At night, though, it was worse. Silence hung over the place like a blanket, broken only by the occasional creak of the old pipes or the faint hum of the fluorescent lights. It didn't help that everyone knew the stories about Swope Hall. If you didn't hear them before you moved in, you heard them after. I'd heard it all. The story about Mary Swope eating paint chips and going insane, the tales of her ghost wandering the halls, the whispers people swore they heard late at night. Most of it sounded like college folklore, a way to scare freshmen and entertain the locals around Halloween. I didn't take it seriously until my third night there. I was studying late, trying to make up for the classes I'd skipped earlier in the week. Around midnight, I decided to stretch my legs and take a walk down the hall. The lights flickered as I stepped out of my room, casting long shadows across the floor. I told myself it was just the old wiring, nothing to worry about. But as I walked, I noticed something strange. It was colder than usual. I pulled my sweater tighter around me, my steps slowing as I reached the end of the hall. There was a window there, the same one where, according to legend, Mary Swope had jumped to her death. I stopped and stared at it for a moment, the glass fogging slightly from the chill in the air. Then I heard it, a whisper. It was faint at first, barely audible, like the rustling of leaves. I thought it might be the wind, but there wasn't a breeze. The sound grew louder, forming words I couldn't quite make out. My chest tightened, and I turned to look behind me. The hall was empty. I shook my head, telling myself I was just tired, that it was my imagination playing tricks on me. But the whisper didn't stop. It seemed to echo through the hall, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Hello," I called out, my voice shaky. Nothing. I took a step back toward my room, but then the whisper turned into laughter. It was soft at first, almost like a child's giggle. Then it grew louder, sharper, echoing off the walls. The sound sent chills racing down my spine, and I froze. And then I saw her. She was sitting in the corner of the hall, dressed in an old-fashioned nightgown, her hair tangled around her face. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap, and she was staring straight at me. At first, I thought she might be another student playing some kind of prank. Who are you?" I stammered. She didn't answer. Her head tilted slightly, her gaze unwavering. Then she smiled, a slow, eerie smile that made my blood run cold. I backed away, my heart pounding in my chest. The laughter grew louder, filling the hall, drowning out my thoughts. I turned and ran, the sound following me as I reached my room and slammed the door shut. I pressed my back against the door, breathing heavily, my hands shaking. The laughter stopped, replaced by silence once again. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still there, just outside my room, waiting. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I asked the dorm supervisor about moving out. He laughed, said everyone gets spooked in Swope Hall, and told me to give it another week. But I didn't stay another week. Story 4. I live in a small town in southwest Missouri, the kind of place where legends aren't just campfire stories. They're part of the fabric of life. Everyone here has heard the tale of the lost Spanish silver mine on Ridgeway Mountain. It's been passed down for generations, but most people just shrug it off as a bit of local folklore. Not me. Not after what I experienced. Ridgeway Mountain isn't far from my house. I can see its oddly flat peak from my backyard. Growing up, it was like a magnet for kids who wanted to explore. We'd hike up there in the summers, joking about finding treasure or running into ghosts. Most of the time, we found nothing but old beer cans and the occasional arrowhead. But one night, everything changed. It was last fall during deer season. I was out with my buddy Tyler, and we were checking some trail cams near the base of the mountain. The sun had set, and the woods were starting to get that eerie stillness they get at night, where even the wind sounds like it's holding its breath. Tyler was ahead of me on the trail, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. "Hey," he called back. "You ever hear that story about the Spanish soldiers up here?" "Which one?" I asked. "The one where their ghosts scream in the night, or the one where the mine's cursed?" "Both," he said with a grin. "You think it's true?" I laughed. "Nah, it's just a story. Something to keep people from snooping around." "Yeah," Tyler said, but he didn't sound convinced. We kept walking, the crunch of leaves underfoot the only sound. Then we heard it. At first it was faint, just a distant clanging, like metal striking rock. I stopped, thinking it was my imagination, but Tyler froze too. "You hear that?" he whispered. I nodded. The sound grew louder, rhythmic, like someone pounding on a stone with a hammer. It echoed through the trees, making it impossible to tell where it was coming from. Tyler and I looked at each other, neither of us saying a word. Then came the voices. They were low and guttural, speaking a language I didn't recognize. It wasn't English, and it sure as hell wasn't anything I'd ever heard around here. The voices rose and fell, overlapping each other, frantic and angry. It sounded like an argument or a fight. "Let's get out of here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But Tyler shook his head. "No way, man. What if it's someone messing with us? We gotta see who it is." Before I could stop him, he started toward the sound. I didn't want to go, but I couldn't leave him out there alone, so I followed. We crept through the trees, the voices getting louder with every step. My heart was pounding in my chest, every instinct screaming at me to turn back. We reached a clearing near the base of the mountain, and that's when we saw it. A faint flickering light danced in the distance. It wasn't like a campfire or a flashlight. It was pale and unsteady, almost like it was floating. Tyler crouched behind a tree, motioning for me to do the same. "What the hell is that?" I hissed. "I don't know," he said, "but I'm gonna find out." Before I could stop him, he moved closer, staying low. I stayed where I was, too terrified to follow. As he crept toward the light, the voices suddenly stopped. The silence was deafening. "Tyler," I whispered, but he didn't respond. Then the light exploded. I don't mean it got brighter, I mean it literally burst, like a star going supernova. For a split second, the entire clearing was bathed in blinding white light. I threw my arm over my face, blinking against the sudden brightness. When my vision cleared, the light was gone. So was Tyler. "Tyler!" I shouted, my voice breaking. I ran into the clearing, spinning in circles, but there was no sign of him. Just me, the trees, and the unbearable quiet. And then I felt it. A cold breeze brushed past me, sending chills racing down my spine. It wasn't like a normal breeze. It was icy, unnatural, like it had come from somewhere it didn't belong. I turned, and that's when I saw them. Figures, shadows, barely visible in the dim light. They stood at the edge of the clearing, their shapes indistinct but undeniably human. One of them raised an arm, pointing at me, and then they started to move. I didn't wait to see what they wanted. I ran, tearing through the woods, branches whipping at my face. The voices started up again, louder this time, overlapping in a chaotic cacophony that made my head feel like it was splitting open. I didn't stop running until I reached the truck. Tyler was there, sitting in the driver's seat, staring straight ahead. "Tyler!" I gasped, yanking open the door. "Where the hell did you go? I thought—" He turned to look at me, and my words died in my throat. His face was pale, his eyes wide and unblinking. "Drive," he said, his voice flat, almost robotic. I didn't argue. I jumped into the passenger seat, and we sped off, neither of us saying a word. When we got back to town, Tyler dropped me off without so much as a goodbye. I haven't seen him since. I don't know what we saw that night, and I don't want to know. All I know is that Bread Tray Mountain isn't just a story. The past isn't as dead as we like to think, and some things are better left alone. Story 5. I didn't believe the stories about Ridgeway Road. I mean, every small town has its haunted spot, right? It's usually just a way to keep kids from speeding or sneaking out at night. But Ridgeway? People swore it was different. They called it the most haunted road in the country, and the stories were endless. Ghosts, red eyes in the woods, phantom trucks. I thought it was all nonsense, until the night I drove it myself. It was late October, just a few days before Halloween. My buddy Chris and I were bored out of our minds, so we decided to go for a drive. He brought up Ridgeway, and I laughed it off at first, but he kept pushing. "Come on, man," he said, grinning. "Let's see if the stories are true. What's the worst that could happen?" I rolled my eyes but agreed. It was just a road after all. What could go wrong? We headed out around 11 p.m., the moon barely visible through the thick clouds. The road was as creepy as people said. Narrow, winding, with trees leaning in so close they almost formed a tunnel. The headlights barely cut through the darkness, and the silence was deafening. No crickets, no wind, just the hum of the engine. "Spooky enough for you?" Chris joked, leaning back in his seat. Yeah, I muttered, keeping my eyes on the road. "It's just a bunch of trees." We drove for a while, and nothing happened. No ghosts, no red eyes, no phantom trucks. I was starting to think the whole thing was a waste of time when we came to the old hairpin turn. It had been straightened out years ago, but you could still see the barrier where the road used to curve toward the lake. "That's where the kid drowned," Chris said, pointing. "They say you can see him sitting there sometimes." I slowed down, more out of curiosity than anything else. The barrier was empty, just a rusted metal rail covered in moss. I was about to make a sarcastic comment when Chris grabbed my arm. "Dude," he whispered, "look." I followed his gaze and my stomach dropped. There, sitting on the barrier, was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 8 or 9, wearing a striped shirt and shorts. His legs dangled over the edge and he was waving at us. "What the hell?" I muttered, my hands tightening on the wheel. Chris leaned forward, his face pale. "Is that?" "I don't know," I snapped, "but we're not sticking around to find out." I hit the gas, the tires skidding slightly as we sped past the barrier. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting the boy to be gone. But he wasn't. He was still there, still waving, his face blank and expressionless. Neither of us said a word as we drove on, the tension in the car thick enough to cut with a knife. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just some kid messing with us. But deep down, I knew better. We hadn't gone more than a mile when the headlights appeared. At first, I thought it was another car coming up behind us, but the lights were too bright, too close. They didn't look like normal headlights. They were harsh, almost blinding, and they didn't flicker or bounce like they should have on the uneven road. "Is that a truck?" Chris asked, his voice shaking. "I don't know," I said, glancing in the mirror, "but it's way too close." I sped up, hoping to put some distance between us and whatever was behind us, but the light stayed right on our bumper, so close I could barely see anything else in the mirror. My heart was pounding, my hands slick with sweat as I gripped the wheel. "Flash your brights," Chris said. "Maybe they'll back off." I did as he said, flicking the high beams on and off. The lights behind us didn't change. If anything, they seemed to get brighter, almost like they were burning into the back of my skull. "Okay, this is not normal," Chris said, his voice rising. "What the hell is that?" "I don't know," I shouted, panic creeping into my voice. "Just hold on." I floored it, the engine roaring as we tore down the road. The trees blurred past us, the headlights still right behind us, unrelenting. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, they were gone. I blinked, glancing in the mirror. Nothing. No lights, no truck, just the empty road stretching out behind us. "Where did it go?" Chris asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," I said, my hands trembling on the wheel, "but I'm not stopping to find out." We drove in silence for a few minutes, the tension in the car unbearable. I was just starting to think we were in the clear when the lights reappeared. This time, they were in front of us. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a stop as the lights bore down on us. They were blinding, filling the entire road, and I could feel the heat of them on my face. Chris was screaming, but I couldn't hear him over the roar of the engine, or whatever it was. And then, just like that, they were gone. The road was empty again, the silence almost deafening. I sat there, my hands gripping the wheel, my heart racing. Chris was shaking, his face pale as a ghost. "Let's get the hell out of here," he said, his voice trembling. I didn't argue. I turned the car around and drove back the way we came, my eyes darting to the mirrors every few seconds. We didn't see the boy, the truck, or anything else on the way back, but the feeling of being watched never left. I haven't been back to Ridgeway Road since that night, and I don't plan to. Whatever's out there, it's not something I want to see again. Story 6. I never put much stock in local legends. When we moved to rural Yucatan 10 years ago, the people in town were full of stories, haunted cenotes, restless spirits, curses from ancient ruins. It felt more like folklore than fact, something they told to keep outsiders entertained. But there was one story that stuck with me because it wasn't just gossip. There were details, there were names, and it had happened just before we arrived. They called it Huayquican, the pig wizard. The way the locals explained it, Huayquican wasn't just some myth. It was real, an actual man who could shapeshift into a white pig, roaming people's backyards after dark to terrorize their animals, steal food, or just scare people. They said he had cursed himself for power, but it came at a cost. People swore they'd seen him sneaking around, and some claimed he'd chase them down when they tried to shoo him away. One night, though, someone got tired of the stories. A farmer, frustrated by repeated disturbances in his backyard, grabbed his rifle. The white pig showed up again, rooting through his trash, and the farmer didn't hesitate. He fired a shot, and the pig darted away. The next morning, the man who everyone whispered was the Huayquican was found dead in his house. No wound, no blood, just dead. I didn't believe any of it. It sounded ridiculous. A man turning into a pig and haunting people's yards? That's the stuff of fairy tales. But my neighbors didn't laugh when they told the story. They warned us to lock our doors at night. They told us not to wander after dark. I smiled politely and nodded, thinking they were just being superstitious. That changed 3 weeks after we moved in. It was late, close to midnight, and the house was quiet. My wife had gone to bed, but I was still awake, finishing some paperwork in the living room. The windows were open, and the jungle outside was alive with the usual nighttime sounds: crickets, distant howls, the occasional rustle of leaves. Then the sound stopped. It wasn't gradual. It was sudden, like someone had flipped a switch. The air grew heavy, oppressive, and I felt this strange pressure in my chest. I shook it off, telling myself it was just the humidity. And then I heard it, a low grunt, deep and guttural, coming from the backyard. My stomach turned, but I grabbed my flashlight, determined to prove it was nothing. Just an animal, I told myself as I stepped onto the porch. The beam of the flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing the trash bins by the fence. They were overturned, garbage spilled across the grass. My heart sank. Something had definitely been here. I scanned the yard looking for movement. That's when I saw it. The pig. It was massive, its white fur gleaming in the moonlight. It stood near the far side of the yard, its eyes black as midnight, staring straight at me. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. It didn't move at first. It just stood there, watching. Then it let out a grunt, sharp and unnatural, and started walking toward me. Its movements weren't like a normal pig. They were deliberate, too steady. Each step felt calculated, like it was testing me. "Get out!" I shouted, gripping the flashlight like it was a weapon. I waved the beam, hoping to scare it off. It didn't flinch. I stepped back onto the porch, my legs shaking. The pig stopped, tilting its head slightly like it was trying to figure me out. Then its black eyes shifted, locking onto mine, and I swear I felt it inside my head. "You're not real," I muttered under my breath, trying to convince myself. But it didn't feel like a wild animal. It felt like something else, something wrong. The flashlight flickered, the beam dimming for a split second. When it came back, the pig was closer, its fur shimmering unnaturally. I stumbled backward, my heart racing. It let out another grunt. Louder this time, almost like a growl. And then it ran, straight at me. I didn't think. I turned and bolted inside, slamming the door behind me. My wife came out of the bedroom, confused by the noise. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice groggy. I couldn't answer. I just locked the door, every window, grabbing the machete we kept for cutting brush. My hands were trembling, my breath shallow. Outside, the grunts continued, circling the house. We stayed awake all night, listening. At one point, I swear I heard scratching at the walls. When the sun finally came up, it stopped. We checked the yard, but there was no sign of the pig. No tracks, no damage, nothing. The locals didn't seem surprised when I told them. They nodded solemnly, saying, "He's still out there." They warned us again not to leave the house after dark, but this time I listened. I haven't seen the Yucatan since that night. Not in Yucatan. Story 7. When I tell this story, I swear it's the absolute truth. People always look at me like I'm crazy, but I'm not exaggerating and I'm not making it up. Something happened to me in that cave, and I'll never forget it for as long as I live. I grew up in a small village, one of those places where the streets are dusty and the stories flow like water. Everyone knew about the treasure buried by the Jews who left decades ago. Gold, jewels, even money hidden in their lands before they fled, thinking they'd come back someday. They never did. As time went on, people stumbled across their treasures by accident, unearthing coins and jewelry when digging up new plots of land. But there was one spot that no one dared to touch: the cave. They said the treasure inside the cave was guarded by jinns. Now, if you don't know what jinns are, think of them as creatures that exist alongside us. You can't usually see them, but they're there, always watching, always present. Some people laughed at the idea, but most avoided the cave entirely. Not me. I thought it was ridiculous. I didn't believe in jinns or curses or ghosts. I believed in treasure, and I was going to be the one to find it. One day I rounded up some cousins and friends and told them we were going to the cave. They looked at me like I was crazy, but eventually curiosity won out, and we headed off. When we got there, I noticed something immediately. It was quiet. Too quiet. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating, like the atmosphere was pressing down on us. The entrance to the cave was nothing special, just a dark hole in the hillside. The others stopped a few feet away, hesitant to go any further. "It doesn't feel right," one of them said, and the rest quickly agreed. They told me they'd wait outside. "Fine," I said, rolling my eyes. "I'll go in alone." I should have listened to them. I should have turned around right then and there. The cave was dark, but I had my flashlight. At first it was just rocks, dirt, and the occasional drip of water from the ceiling. I walked further in, my footsteps echoing, my breath loud in my ears. The air got heavier the deeper I went. It felt colder too. I kept telling myself it was nothing, just my imagination playing tricks on me. And then I saw it. At first I thought it was another person, maybe someone who had snuck in before me. But as I shined the flashlight, the figure became clearer. It wasn't a person. It had the body of a man, tall and thin, but its head was that of a donkey. Its black, glassy eyes stared straight at me, unblinking, and its mouth twisted into this unnatural shape. I froze. My flashlight shook in my hand, but I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then the thing opened its mouth, and the sound that came out was something I can't even describe. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a growl. It was something else entirely. Primal, raw, and so terrifying it felt like it pierced through my very soul. That's when I ran. I don't remember turning around. I don't remember the path back to the entrance. All I remember is running faster than I thought possible, faster than I ever had in my life. I burst out of the cave, sprinted past my cousins without a word, and didn't stop until I reached my house. I locked myself in my room, shaking, my heart pounding, my thoughts racing. For an entire month, I didn't speak a single word. I couldn't. Every time I tried, all I could hear was the sound that thing made. I didn't eat with my family, didn't leave my room, barely even slept. My hair started turning white at the roots, and I felt like I was losing myself. Finally, after weeks of silence, I told my family what happened. I swore on my life that I was telling the truth. Some of them believed me, others didn't. But one thing was certain. No one has gone near that cave since. I don't know what I saw, and I don't want to know. All I know is that some places are better left undisturbed. There are things in this world that aren't meant for us to find, and that cave is one of them. Story 8. There's a stretch of old road I drive every now and then, and every time I pass the crumbling asylum at the edge of town, I feel my chest tighten. People talk about it like it's a piece of local history, just an old mental hospital that fell into disrepair. But that's not the part they remember. The story, the one everyone whispers when the sun sets, is about the woman who used to sit in her room, turning a lamp on and off, over and over. even after she died. Now, I didn't grow up believing in ghosts or spirits. Hell, I still don't know what to make of all this. But one night, curiosity got the better of me. And let me tell you, I wish it hadn't. It started with my friend Kyle daring me to go. He said, "People swear you can see her light at night. Bet you don't have the guts to check it out." It wasn't like we had anything better to do. We were bored, driving around, killing time. The asylum was only a few miles out of town, and I figured we'd take a quick look, maybe laugh at how creepy it was and go home. So we headed there, a couple of flashlights in the back seat, acting tougher than we felt. When we pulled up, the place looked worse than I remembered. The building was massive, looming in the moonlight like some kind of fortress. Windows were shattered, graffiti covered the walls, and vines clawed their way up the sides. But it wasn't just the way it looked. It was the silence. No wind, no animals. Just nothing. "All right, let's get this over with," I muttered, grabbing my flashlight. Kyle grinned, trying to hide the nervous shake in his hands. "Let's see if she left the light on for us." We crossed the overgrown lot, the crunch of gravel underfoot the only sound. The front door was long gone, replaced by darkness that seemed to spill out of the building like smoke. My stomach twisted as we stepped inside. The air was colder in there, damp and heavy, and the smell of mildew was so strong it made my eyes water. We stuck close together, our flashlights cutting through the dark hallways. Everything was falling apart. Peeling wallpaper, rusted bed frames, broken chairs. Every sound we made echoed back at us, making it feel like we weren't alone. After about 10 minutes of wandering, Kyle nudged me. "You think the story's true?" he asked, his voice low. I shrugged, pretending to be braver than I was. "Doubt it. Probably just a way to keep people out of here." But then we saw it. At the far end of the hallway, a dim light flickered on. It was soft, like an old lamp, casting just enough glow to outline the doorway it was coming from. We froze. "Did you see that?" Kyle whispered. "Yeah." My throat felt dry. "Let's go." We moved slowly, our footsteps quiet now. The closer we got, the brighter the light became. It wasn't steady, it flickered on and off, like someone was toying with the switch. My pulse was pounding in my ears and every instinct told me to turn around, but I kept going. When we reached the doorway, I felt like I couldn't breathe. The room was small, mostly empty, but there it was, an old lamp sitting on the floor, glowing faintly. It turned off, then on again. Off, then on, and there was no one there. "Kyle," I started, but I didn't know what to say. "Let's leave," he said, his voice shaking. We turned to go, but then we heard it, a faint sound like a hum. It wasn't coming from the lamp, it was coming from the hallway behind us. I spun around, shining my flashlight down the corridor. Nothing, just the same cold, empty hallway we'd come from. And then the light in the room went out. Completely. The darkness was overwhelming, like someone had smothered the air itself. Kyle grabbed my arm, his nails digging into my skin. "We need to go. Now." I nodded, but before we could move, the lamp flickered back on, and this time, there was a shadow. It wasn't ours. It stood near the corner of the room, tall and motionless, like someone standing just out of reach of the light. My flashlight trembled as I lifted it, the beam cutting through the dark. There was nothing there, no one, but the shadow didn't go away. It moved, slowly, toward us. I don't remember much after that, just Kyle yelling, grabbing my jacket, and the two of us running as fast as we could. We didn't stop until we were back in the car, slamming the doors and peeling out of there like something was chasing us. We never talked about it after that night. Every time someone brought up the asylum, we'd just exchange a glance and shake our heads. I still don't know what we saw, but I haven't been back since. And I don't plan to. Whatever's in that asylum, it's better left alone. Story 9. I don't know if you've ever walked into a place and felt like it was watching you, but that's exactly what happened to me at the Riverview Hotel. That place has always been a big deal in our tiny town, mostly because of its history. Back during Prohibition, it was a speakeasy. They hid liquor in the walls and used the bowling alley in the basement to keep people entertained while breaking the law. You can still see the bullet holes from some shootout that happened there decades ago. But the real reason people talk about the Riverview isn't the history, it's the stories, the ghost stories. I never believed in that stuff. To me, the Riverview was just a creaky old hotel that people like to hype up for fun. Ghosts? Yeah, right. Then one night, my friends convinced me to check it out. And now I'm not so sure. It was late October, a few days before Halloween, when my buddy Sam brought it up. "Let's go to the Riverview and take a picture in the bowling alley," he said. He had this wild look in his eyes, the kind that meant we weren't going to talk him out of it. "Why?" I asked, already regretting being part of this conversation. "Because that's where people see her," Sam said, lowering his voice for dramatic effect. "See who?" Rachel chimed in, leaning forward like she actually wanted to hear the answer. "The girl," Sam replied, "the one in the photo." According to Sam, years ago, a group of friends had taken a photo in the bowling alley. When they looked at it later, there was a girl in the picture, a little girl in an old-fashioned dress, standing behind them. The thing is, none of them had seen her while they were there. The photo got passed around town, and everyone swore it wasn't doctored. The image always creeped me out, but I figured it was just some clever prank. Still, Sam was determined to recreate the moment, and for some reason, we went along with it. We got to the Riverview around 9 p.m., just as the last rays of sunlight were fading. The place looked like something out of a horror movie, with its weathered brick exterior and flickering neon sign. The front desk clerk barely looked up as we walked in, too distracted by her phone to care where we were headed. That was fine by us. The less attention, the better. The bowling alley was down a narrow set of stairs in the basement. The air grew colder as we descended, and the sound of our footsteps echoed in a way that made the place feel emptier than it probably was. When we reached the bottom, I flicked on my flashlight and scanned the room. It was exactly how I remembered it from when I was a kid. Old wooden lanes, faded red benches, and a row of dusty bowling balls that probably hadn't been touched in years. The only light came from a flickering bulb near the door, casting strange shadows on the walls. "All right," Sam said, pulling out his phone. "Let's line up." We stood at the end of one of the lanes, with Sam holding up his phone to snap the picture. "Smile," he said, grinning like this was all just a big joke. Rachel rolled her eyes and I forced a half-hearted smirk, ready to get this over with. He clicked the photo, but before we could move, the lights went out. All of them. The sudden darkness was suffocating. I could hear Rachel gasp and Sam mutter, "What the hell?" as we fumbled for our flashlights. When I finally got mine on, I swept it across the room, trying to figure out what just happened. That's when I saw it. A pin at the end of the lane was moving. Just one. It wobbled slightly, then tipped over, falling with a loud clatter that echoed through the basement. "Did you see that?" Rachel whispered, her voice trembling. "It's just the air," Sam said, but he didn't sound convinced. Then we heard it, a faint sound like a child laughing. It was soft at first, almost like it was coming from another room, but it grew louder, more distinct, until it seemed to fill the entire alley. My flashlight shook in my hand as I tried to find the source of the noise, but there was nothing there, just us. "I'm out," Rachel said, backing toward the stairs. "Wait," Sam said, holding up his phone. "Let's just check the photo." He pulled up the picture he'd taken, the screen lighting up his face. At first, he didn't say anything. Then his eyes widened and his hands started to shake. "What is it?" I asked, stepping closer. He turned the phone toward me, and my stomach dropped. There in the picture was the three of us standing at the end of the lane, and behind us in the shadows was a girl. She looked about 8 or 9 with long dark hair and a pale face. Her dress was old-fashioned, like something out of the early 1900s. But what got me, what really made my skin crawl, was her eyes. They were black, completely black. "Let's go," I said, my voice cracking as I grabbed Rachel's arm and started for the stairs. We didn't argue. We ran. By the time we got to the car, we were out of breath and too scared to speak. Sam deleted the photo before we even left the parking lot. He said he didn't want any evidence, didn't want to risk whatever we'd seen coming after him. I didn't argue. We haven't been back to the Riverview since, and I don't plan to. Whatever's in that bowling alley, it's better left alone. Let someone else deal with the ghosts. I'm done. Story 10. The basement in the house where I grew up was always the thing that made people stop and stare. It wasn't just a basement, it was a piece of history. Back during Prohibition, it had been a speakeasy, hidden under the house like a secret world. The original wooden bar was still there, complete with paneled mirror walls stained from decades of cigarette smoke and spilled drinks. The place was old, musty, and eerie in a way I couldn't quite put into words. My parents loved the charm, loved the history. They said Elliot Ness had been here once, back when he was hunting Al Capone in the Midwest. I didn't care about any of that. As a kid, I just knew the basement scared the hell out of me. Every time I had to go down there, I'd rush to grab whatever I needed and bolt back upstairs. There was something about the air, a strange chill, that seemed to follow you no matter how warm the house was. It wasn't just the cold, though. It was the feeling that someone was watching you. You'd glance over your shoulder and see nothing, but it didn't matter. The feeling stayed. One time when I was about 8, I swore I felt something brush past my leg. It was quick, like a gust of icy wind, but there was no wind in the basement. I told my mom, but she just laughed, said I was imagining things. Still, after that, I always avoided going down there alone. That brings me to the night everything changed. I had 3 friends over, Chris, Tyler, and Megan, and we decided to play hide and seek. The house was perfect for it, with its narrow hallways and endless nooks and crannies. Eventually, we ended up in the basement, which we all agreed was the best spot to hide. It was a lot darker down there, and no one liked being alone in the basement, so it added to the thrill. There was a back room behind the bar, separated by this huge, heavy barn door. It used to be an outside door before the house was expanded, but now it led to a small storage area filled with junk my parents didn't use. The door was old, solid wood, and it had one of those sliding latches on the outside to lock it. For some reason, it always freaked me out. "Let's hide back there," Chris said, already pulling the door open. "No way," Megan protested. "It's creepy." "Exactly," Chris grinned. "No one will look here." We all went inside, squeezing into the cramped space and joking about how haunted it felt. Tyler shut the door behind us, laughing as Megan groaned about how stupid this was. A few minutes passed and we heard someone upstairs shouting, "Found you!" Megan whispered, "Maybe we should move." But Chris shushed her. "They'll never find us," he said, his voice barely audible. That's when it happened. The latch on the outside of the barn door slid into place. It didn't creak, didn't hesitate. It snapped shut like someone had slammed it. "Did you lock it?" Tyler asked, his voice shaky. "No," Chris said, standing up. "It's locked from the outside." "That's not funny," Megan muttered, standing up and pulling at the door. It didn't budge. I tried not to panic, but my chest felt tight. "Who's out there?" I shouted. "Let us out!" There was no response. The basement was silent. Tyler grabbed the door handle, pulling and shaking it, but the latch wouldn't move. Megan was panicking now, her voice rising. "This isn't funny. Let us out!" Chris tried kicking the door, but it didn't even rattle. It was solid, and the latch was firmly in place. "Someone's upstairs," I said, trying to stay calm. "They'll let us out." Except no one came. We shouted, we banged on the door, but it felt like we were trapped in a bubble. The air grew colder, like the temperature had dropped 10 degrees, and I could hear Megan sobbing softly in the corner. That's when the strange feeling came back, the one I always got in the basement. The feeling that someone was watching. It was stronger this time, almost suffocating, like the walls themselves were closing in. I wanted to tell the others, but the words caught in my throat. I was afraid I might scare them more than they already were. Then we heard it, a faint sound, almost like a whisper. It didn't come from outside the door. It came from inside the room. Megan froze, her eyes wide, and Chris whispered, "Did you hear that?" "Stop messing around," Tyler snapped, his voice shaking. "I'm not," Chris said, his face pale. The whisper came again, louder this time. It was soft, almost like it was brushing past my ear, but there was no one near me. Megan screamed, and Chris started pounding on the door harder, shouting for someone to help. Finally, after what felt like forever, we heard footsteps upstairs. My dad came down yelling, "What's going on?" "We're stuck," Tyler shouted. I heard him fumbling with the latch, cursing under his breath. "What the hell?" he muttered. "This thing shouldn't be locked." It took him 20 minutes to get the latch open, and when he finally swung the door open, we bolted out. Megan ran upstairs, still crying, and Tyler and Chris followed close behind. I stayed in the basement for a moment, staring at the door, trying to make sense of what had happened. "It shouldn't lock from the outside," my dad said, scratching his head. "I mean, it does, but no one's supposed to touch it." "Someone locked it," I said, my voice trembling. He shook his head. "No one's here but us." I didn't argue. I just followed him upstairs, the cold still clinging to my skin. After that night, none of us ever played in the basement again. The barn door stayed shut, and I avoided the basement as much as I could. I don't know what locked us in that night, and I don't know what I heard in that room. But I do know one thing. Whatever's in that basement isn't just history, it's something else entirely. Thanks for watching. Don't leave before leaving a like to this video. Also hit the subscribe button to support my work. And as always, have a horrific nightmare, my dear.